From the Chicago Sun-Times newsroom, I'm Natasha Korecki, and this is Off Message, our weekly political talk show. Joining us this week, we have Second Ward Alderman Bob Fioretti, City Hall reporter Fran Spielman, and our Watchdog reporter Dan Mihalopoulos. This week, we're going to talk about the mayoral contest, and because we have mayoral candidate, you just announced your candidacy. Why do you think that you can do a better job than Rahm Emanuel?
Well, I'm running for mayor because I love this city. And I believe we no longer can afford the type of leadership that divides us and ignores the majority of the wishes of the people of this city. And when Rahm Emanuel came into town 4 years ago, he said he was going to get tough. And all we got left was with tough luck. And I hear it wherever I go, across this city, throughout my ward, people are saying, one, they want somebody who will listen to them as a mayor, and I will listen to them. They want somebody who will fight for them and who will not ignore their needs. And I will be that type of mayor. I have been that type of alderman, and I'm going to continue that leadership on the fifth floor, but throughout the city of Chicago.
What is your base?
Well, right now, I think it's very extensive. It's in every ward. We have people. It's across all racial lines, economic lines, and every zip code in this city.
So how do you get past Rahm Emanuel, who has not only the money, but the political savvy and the connections? Where are you with fundraising? Why don't we start there?
Well, we're beginning in a very active and aggressive fundraising. I'm never going to have, and we the people are never going to have, the kind of war chest that this mayor has, the deep pocket super PAC type individuals, as you know. 14 people that gave $1.3 million to a super PAC designed to destroy dissenting voices in the city council. But we're going to raise the funds, and we're going to get the message out to the people of the city to make sure that we have the issues that are necessary that they can listen to and make a decision on who should lead this city for the future.
Well, let's bring in the discussion about Karen Lewis. Aren't you guys going after the same types of people?
Well, first of all, if Karen joins the race, I welcome each and every voice in this race. I think it's important to have a very healthy discussion on where we go, what we're doing for the future. Sometimes maybe the more voices, the better, on who and what we are as a city.
Do you think that if she does get into this race that she should resign her position from Chicago Teachers Union or take a leave of absence?
Well, I think Karen knows what she will do best,
Is it a
both
conflict?
for her membership and what she will do in the future.
But do you think that it's a conflict?
You know what? I'm not even sure if she's going to get in this race.
You're not?
So, no.
Do you help or hurt each other? I mean, together, do you help to hold him under 50%, which is what he needs to avoid a runoff?
Well, maybe the runoff on the day after the election in February may be between Karen and myself, and not Rahm Emanuel.
Well, Dan, let's get you involved a little bit here. Do you see a scenario where there could be a runoff?
I think there can be a runoff. I think it's highly unlikely that it would be Mr. Fioretti versus Karen Lewis. Now, seeing that both candidates have the same approach doesn't mean that they won't help each other rather than harm each other, both challengers, I should say. I think that they may. So you're saying that
Lewis and Fioretti would help each other?
I think they could. I think they absolutely could. That's not to say that you're working in tandem. I trust that your intentions are sincere. I think that there may be certain voters who don't want to vote for Rahm Emanuel, who don't want Karen Lewis, or who don't know Fioretti. Some of those voters who are put off by Karen Lewis's style, as it were, they may gravitate toward Bob Fioretti. I'm talking about perhaps public employees in some of the wards on the northwest and southwest sides where a good ethnic name like Fioretti might do well. And some of those are city employees who didn't vote for Rahm Emanuel in 2011. And are even angrier at him in 2014 and 2015. Okay.
So the 50 schools closing is what sticks in a lot of people's craw and is why there's been so much discontent on the south and west sides with Rahm Emanuel. What would you have done differently?
Well, first of all, I do believe that we have had population losses. And I think we need an elected school board that represents the diversity of this city and can make the right kind of decisions across the board for our students.
Fran, what kind of appetite do you think there is for an elected school board?
Oh, I think if it gets on the ballot, it would win, absolutely, which is why they've tried so hard to keep it off.
Right now, if you talk about CPS, you're talking 100% about Rahm. But if I could change the topic for a second, I'd like to ask Alderman Fioretti, there's a lot of things that you're talking about spending money on. The money situation is dire right now for the city. Is there anything you'd cut that you think, any savings that you'd like to
Those of us that were around under both administrations have been vigorous in advocating that we need a forensics audit of the budgets. We found the money for the 500 police officers. That was tabled. We can find the few $1 million to reopen those mental health clinics. And if we find the right way to work together and find the way to get jobs for not only for the South and West Side, but for our youth during the summer, I think we're going to be having a healthier city and a better city as we move forward.
What is your position on revenue streams? Rahm Emanuel's talked about having to increase the property tax in the city in the past?
Well,
I've
got the same position as I did in '07 when I voted against the daily budget then, that property taxes really become another form of foreclosure. And we are still in fragile economic times. The foreclosures have been slowing down here in this city, granted, but we still have a lot of vacant properties, vacant homes because of that foreclosure crisis. And we have to be very careful. For me, it's off the table of raising property taxes.
What about the sales tax, broadening the umbrella and making it on services?
I agree. Look at our neighboring states. They have much more broader base for our sales tax. And we ought to be looking at that too as a state.
Would you use that for police and fire pensions?
I think there's a lot of things to use on police and fire pensions across the board.
Is that going to do it, Fran?
Is that going to do enough? Oh, I think the city needs much. I mean, the city probably needs a property tax increase, probably needs to broaden the sales tax on services, probably needs a casino if they're still viable, maybe not when you see what's going on in Vegas and Atlantic City. But the city needs so much new revenue that it needs to draw from several pots, I think. And cut.
Well, there are a lot of revenue sources. I'm putting ideas on the table. And yes, all those ideas I've talked about in the past, I've advocated in the past. I've changed some of my positions even to look at those, because we need to have a full, healthy discussion about how we go forward and what we need to do here in this city.
Speaking of health, how is your health? You had tonsil cancer. It nixed your last campaign for mayor. How are you now?
I'm doing fine. You know, I lost almost 40, 50 pounds. I put 30-some back on. I exercise 3 times a week.
That must have been fun.
And I had a feeding tube for 7 months, you know, and all of that was impacted on how I felt.
Can you say that with certainty that you would be able to stay within this race? And if you were to win, that you'd be able to?
I'm going to stay in this race, number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, I am healthy. And I would not enter this race if I wasn't healthy, because I think the people of this city need a leader who is going to be working 24 hours a day for their interests.
How did it change you, the whole health crisis? It came out of the blue.
It sure did. Right now, at any given time during any week, I probably talk to and counsel 5 different people, and I'm proud of it, because I think as a public official, we need to get that out, and we should do our best for those that are hurting. And one thing that really changed me is I had very good health care, and it covered a lot, but there were still mounting bills that had to be paid from it, and I paid those bills. But the health care I had is the health care that everyone should have in this city.
Bob, can you talk a little bit about what Dan's written about with some of your debts?
Yeah, I think specific to the campaign, a couple of things that we brought out in '07, it was reported initially that your campaign spent somewhere on the order of $300,000 to $400,000 in that 6-month period around the election and the runoff that you won to become a member of the city council. And later on, you file amended reports the following year that show $1 million. And I've seen problems on campaign finance reports, but I've never seen a gap that big between the reality as it was presented at the time of the campaign and what it ended up being. The other issue was some of your campaign staffers who, despite the fact that you raised and spent more than $1 million in total, didn't get paid for 5 and 6 weeks of work. How would you say that you could promise that this doesn't happen to the staffer that came with you here today or to others who would join your campaign?
Well, first of all, we look at things, and we have a top-notch campaign and staff right now that's in place. When we looked at it, we thought we hired people that told us they've done this a number of times, and they had a record of doing it a number of times. You know, we have, apparently there's at least 250 campaign violations pending that are now in the ethics office that were transferred from the Legislative Inspector General that are now pending over there. When we discovered it, I said, wait a minute, we got to go and let's work with the State Board of Elections, see what we need to do, and clean this problem up. You know, that was number one. Number two, when you talk about staff, there were a couple people, I thought they were volunteers, but you know what? We need to pay whoever we pay. I've always said it, and when I got sick, I had also a law firm that I was there as one of the individuals. I wasn't the managing partner, but
you were a named partner.
I was a named
First
partner.
name.
Yes, exactly. But you know what we need to do? I said we got to pay all our bills, and they're being paid and paid off in a rational way, because sometimes you can't pay everything off today because you got tax implications, just so you know.
About that
the same
lawsuit,
thing about when we deal with the city. You know, we can only borrow so much. You know, we can't keep kicking the can down the road on what we need to do. And that's very crucial in terms of how we understand where we're going and when we generate new revenue sources. All that's important for the future of this city.
Just one final question about that baggage, as we termed it. There is a lawsuit that's still ongoing between some of the lawyers that worked in that firm where you were a named partner, and they say that they're owed money. The lawsuit's been pending for 3 years. Why not pay them what they say they're owed?
There's a dispute as to the amount. My other named partner is handling all of the lawsuit. He's the managing partner on that. And I think they're going to have some resolution across the board on it shortly.
Well, let's turn back to campaign fundraising. I found it interesting that there's a law right now that if an outside group spends $100,000, the caps come off. If the caps did come off this race, would you go ahead and allow the money to flow in?
Well, the problem that we're faced with here, and I've always been a proponent of minimal contributions to make the difference. I believe New York has limits on it. I mean, this is really obscene that somebody's got $8 million and probably may have another $8 million in the campaign war chest.
Why is it that the guy who's poor always says it's obscene?
No, yeah, well, but it is. I mean,
you won't take big money donations?
Well, I'm going to take a look at it, no, and hopefully they don't set your agenda. You've got to be able to say no to people that are contributing to you or else. And you know, that's the difficulty.
Who is Rahm not saying no to right now?
I think the special interests, the 13, 14 people that gave him the money for his super PAC. I think some of the developers that make the contributions on the same day as things are going through the city council. I think those are questions that we got to raise.
Can you point to something in particular where you saw money flowing to him and then a decision that he made?
Well, I think specifically on the super PAC, there were only a couple of questions that were asked on that super PAC. What's that designed to do? That's clearly designed after the 8 aldermen for what they stand for, and to any challenger that may think otherwise. And so big money has been controlling these elections. We need to get it under control. And I will be an advocate to make sure that we have limits on contributions in the future on what we do.
But the issue then is you get into the race. Karen Lewis is in the race. You know, would a Karen Lewis candidacy and a Fioretti candidacy, would they be tapping some of the same small money donations in the city?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are many ways that you could tap smaller money donations. MoveOn.org is one. They said that the most interest was in Karen Lewis, but of course that's a very, very informal poll of their members, and some mentioned Bob Fioretti. So sure, there can be progressive-minded people who think that Rahm Emanuel is a Democrat in name only. So, I mean, there are specific individuals I can think of. Marty Ritter is a top aide to Karen Lewis, and when Karen spoke at your fundraiser earlier this year, she mentioned that you had sent Marty Ritter to her. So I don't know who Marty Ritter is going to be with.
Who do you think Marty Ritter is going to be with?
Marty is a good friend of mine, so let's put it that way.
You're asking people for $25 donations. It's going to take a lot of those to get you even near Rahm Emanuel.
And maybe that's what we have to do.
$25, it'll take you forever.
Yeah, I'm ready to make those calls and ask for $25 from the people of the city of Chicago, because that way it shows that everybody will be equal in terms of how we approach this campaign and how we approach the future of this city.
Okay, well, great discussion, everyone, great talk, and let's close up with our quote of the week. Why don't we start with you, Dick?
This won't come as any news to you, although the story is about to break, but you received an email as a committeeman of the Democratic Party in the 2nd Ward, where Joe Barrios, the chairman of the Democratic Party, had his staff offer all the committeemen the opportunity to come and pick up nominating signature petitions for Mayor Emanuel's reelection campaign. And when we asked Mayor Emanuel's reelection campaign spokesman how this had come to be that Joe Barrios and the Democratic Party was helping Rahm Emanuel since they haven't endorsed any candidate in the race yet, the reply from the mayor's spokesman was, quote, "The chairman offered his assistance and the campaign accepted."
It's the Hollywood sign of Chicago. Donald Trump crowing that Mayor Rahm Emanuel's new rules on riverfront signs are going to help him because his will be one of the only big ones.
I'm saying I'm running, but I think we are running for mayor of the city of Chicago because we can no longer afford the type of leadership that divides us and ignores the needs and struggles of everyday Chicagoans.
So that's your quote.
Yes.
Quote of the week. Well, if you can't quote yourself and you're running for mayor, who can you quote, right?
That's right.
And I will turn to Bruce Rauner. Earlier this week, his campaign did not allow in 12 journalism students from Columbia College with their professor. When I talked to the professor later, who's also former Sun-Times reporter, Curtis Lawrence, he mentioned that he was talking to his students about, like, hey, what was your experience with Pat Quinn's campaign in the past? And they said he was great to us, quote, "They gave us candy." With that, thank you very much. Thank you for undergoing the grilling of 3 Sun-Times reporters and surviving. And we will see you next week on Off Message.